Hey, 7th grade. I know yesterday's video was kind of long and packed with a bunch of stuff, so today's video is going to be kind of a review. If I was at school, I'd be writing this out on the whiteboard and have it kept on the whiteboard for a while. But we have to make it. Like I said yesterday, a couple of dates, a couple of things you need to get in mind. The Yalta Conference, which you have a picture of on your textbook on page 372, with Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin, met in February 4th of 1945. They knew at that time it was not going to be long until the war in Europe ended. Roosevelt dies April the 12th, 1945. Now, keep in mind, some people thought that Roosevelt did a great job at Yalta. Some people can't stand Roosevelt and don't like what he did at Yalta. As you're reading the book, kind of keep that in mind. Different opinions, different ideas are going to come through. Some people believe that Roosevelt's health was failing, and so he gave in too easy to Stalin. Remember, kind of part of the whole meeting at Yalta, and the one that's mentioned in my Cold War book at the meeting at Potsdam, was to figure out now what. We had accepted the Soviet Union as one of our allies during the World War II, even though it was a communist country. Even though the Soviet Union, at that time Russia, Stalin was a very weird ally for the United States and Great Britain to have. But we figured it was better to have them on our side than to have them on their own. So Roosevelt dies, which means now Truman is president. So Truman is president for VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, on May the 7th. The conference at Yalta, one of the things is, okay, once the war in Europe is over, Stalin agrees to help us defeat Japan. So, Victory in Japan Day is September the 2nd. Remember, Roosevelt has died, so Truman's the one that agrees to drop the atomic bomb. The meeting at Yalta in February and the meeting at Potsdam in July of 1945 also met to figure out how Europe was going to be divided up. So be sure to look at the map on page 374 in your book that shows how Germany was divided up, and then weirdly enough, Berlin was divided up. Because Berlin was very, very, very deep into East Germany, right almost on the border of Poland, but it still ends up getting divided up into your communist side and your free side. We'll talk more about that later. Then, February the 6th, I put the wrong date, this was supposed to be a 6, 1946, so we're talking months after the victory in Japan. We're talking we're talking exactly a year almost from the meeting at Yalta, where Stalin's saying they're all going to work together. Stalin is making a speech saying that communism and capitalism are incompatible. In effect, the end of the wartime truce. As I said, I have this book, The Cold War. The title, Threat, Paranoia, and Depression, From the Iron Curtain to the Collapse of Communism. And I'm going to read parts of it today. What exactly was the Cold War? One definition would be that it was the West's long struggle to overcome the Soviet attempt to dominate it and the world. Remember, the West is basically your free countries. So the United States, Great Britain, United States being kind of the top one. Another would be that it was the struggle for control of Europe. Some would see it as World War III, fought out in slow motion with relatively little fighting. In this context, wars like those in Korea and Vietnam were campaigns in the larger Cold War. Many expected the Cold War to turn into a full-scale World War III. But that never happened, largely because both sides feared nuclear war. That both sides so often had the sense to draw back from the brink is probably the most hopeful part of the story. The roots of the war can be found in the ideology which shaped the revolution at its formation in 1917. That's going back to the Bolshevik Revolution, when the communists came in and took over Russia. Lenin and his cohorts saw themselves as world revolutionaries. Inevitably, the established world order would retaliate. And so it keeps going on that from there you end up with this conflict between the capitalist free countries and communist Soviet Union. Which one is better? Your textbook mentions the Iron Curtain. So I want to read just a little bit out of here about the Iron Curtain. He, talking about Stalin, told the senior Yugoslav communist that another war, perhaps in 10 or 20 years, might destroy imperialism altogether. Wherever the Soviet army was in occupation at the end of World War II, Stalin intended to maintain power and make it a communist country. So that means any country that Stalin was in at the end of World War II, countries like Poland, Yugoslavia, and on and on and on, he wanted to make a communist country and maintain control of. Communist guerrillas who had liberated Yugoslavia retained power in it. Soviet-occupied Hungary still had a little bit of democracy, but that didn't last long. In a speech at Westminster College in March 1946, Winston Churchill declared that an iron curtain has descended across the continent, a metaphor earlier used by the journalist St. Vincent Truebridge in October. Stalin was little different from Hitler. Churchill's speech now seemed to express perfectly what was happening, but it had a cold reception at the time because not everybody understood just how powerful and awful Stalin was at first. Slowly they would figure it out. So let's talk homework, the not so fun part of things. Yesterday, I told you I wanted you to click on the website and read about the Cold War. Read this article about the Cold War. Be sure to look at the pictures. The saying is a picture's worth 1,000 words. I definitely think that's true. Especially look at the pictures of the drills that school kids had to go through. And just imagine having to add to, all the drills that we have, having to go through nuclear fallout drills. Also think about the idiocy, let's be honest, of these drills. I mean, they basically are in tornado drill position. So I kind of look at those pictures and laugh. And then I attached some questions that I want you to answer. I'm giving you a week, so I'm looking for more than just a word. I'm looking for you to really try to completely understand what's going on here and give me some good answers on those. So that's kind of your ongoing thing. Today, of course, like every day, you have simple solutions, homework, simple solutions, open book quiz. Read definitely 24.1. It's a review of everything we've talked about. One last note about 24.1. It starts talking about the UN, the United Nations. Once again, it's one of those things that some people love. They think the United Nations is wonderful and does all this stuff to help the country maintain peace, and it's why we haven't had World War III and whatever. Other people think it's a communist mess. I'm making no opinion, just letting you know there are two sides there. As you're reading this, you can probably figure out how Rebecca feels about the United Nations. So read 24.1. You can start on 24.2 if you want to. It'll be less reading later on. I'll kind of leave that up to you. So that's it for today.